think we'll go ahead and get rocking and rolling here. Thank you again for joining us for the Swarthmore College webinar. My name is Windsor Jordan. I'm a Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions and Director of Access and Equity here at Swarthmore College. We appreciate you joining us. Just a couple of homekeeping things as we get started here. For tonight's conversation, we're going to put your questions for us in the Q&A space, so please use that Q&A space to ask questions as we move through the evening here. And as we hear from our wonderful panelists, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can after we hear from our panelists for a little while here. Again, I want to start with some kind of big picture things about what we're going to be talking about. And this is really a conversation we're going to learn deeply about two cultural centers on our campus here at Swarthmore that play a role in all students' lives throughout the campus. This is a conversation billed as kind of how we build community at Swarthmore. So there's lots of things included in diversity and equity and inclusion work at Swarthmore. And the two folks who joined us today to talk about their work in the cultural centers on our campus represent only a small portion of all the work that happens on the faculty side, on the student side, on the staff side, what we do around diversity and inclusion. But these two centers play a really important role in that as well. And so we're here to hear from the Black Culture Center and about the Intercultural Center here at Swarthmore College. And I just want to give you a kind of big picture overview of what those centers are. First, the Black Culture Center, founded over 50 years ago on our campus, out of student activism around representation on our campus for Black students and other students of color. Again, the center celebrated its 50th anniversary just this past year, which included lots of alumni coming back to talk about the legacy of the center, its history, and what it's offered students over the course of its time on campus. Similarly, the Intercultural Center here at Swarthmore was also founded out of student activism, wanting to bring representation and opportunities for students of color, LGBTQ students, low-income students, and that center has grown over the course of since its founding back in 1992. It recently was upgraded with some funds from some wonderful alumni to expand what the center can do and expand the space of the center. Intercultural Center includes an interfaith center as well as international student center, all coming together to think about the lives of students from all different backgrounds on our campus. That's kind of the big picture thing I wanted to provide for you all. But you're not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from our two wonderful panelists who joined us this evening. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and give us a sense of their role on campus, and generally give us an introduction to their center, what role the center plays on campus, and for students and the student groups that are within those centers as well. And we'll start with you, Dion, and then we'll go to Amadi.
Thank you, Windsor, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Dion Lewis. I'm an Associate Dean of Students here and Director of the Swarthmore Black Cultural Center. And I was just talking about someone earlier, in about 2 weeks, it'll be my 6-year anniversary here. So I've seen some great changes. I first want to have everyone draw attention to my screen behind me. That is actually the Swarthmore Black Cultural Center. If I move my head, you might be able to see the banner. We put that up in the 2019-2020 school year to celebrate the Swarthmore Black Cultural Center's 50th anniversary. We officially opened in March of 1970 as the first identity center at Swarthmore. And we spent most of the academic year celebrating not only the 50th anniversary of the Black Cultural Center, but the 50th anniversary of the Black Studies program, which is an academic program. And as Windsor mentioned, there were a number of programs that we had, and there were some that got canceled. Some of our larger ones were supposed to be in the spring semester, but it was a great time. I like to think of the BCC, which is affectionately known. It's also known as the house because it is a house. Most students, once they get to their second or third year, they start calling it the house. I want to go to the house. I want to go to the house. And that means a lot to me because when we think of a house, I think of a home, and that's intentionally what we try to do. We really try to make that space be a home away from home for obviously students of African descent, but all students. When you walk in there, I think, and I'm biased, of course, it's like no other space on campus. It just has this warm feel from you're walking into a house, and there's furniture that looks like you might find in someone's home. And more often than not, a student might be cooking or in the kitchen, so you'll smell the aroma of food, or students are in the living room watching the flat screen TV, or another students are in studying in another space. But for that, we obviously have also student groups who are affiliated with the BCC, and who call the BCC their home. Home being it's a space where they meet, where they gather, where they plan. And I just like to mention those. The oldest student organization, which started in 1967, is the Swarthmore African American Student Society, known as SAS. And it's kind of the equivalent of the BSU, or Black Student Unions, on a lot of other campuses across the country, where all students of African descent are invited to join it. But it's obviously all students. There are some students who choose other organizations, such as the Swarthmore African Student Association, known as SASA, where students from the continent of Africa usually join and participate in that. Then we have SOCA, which is the Swarthmore Organization for Caribbean Awareness, and that's usually students from the Caribbean, West Indian students, even some Latin American islands also participate in that organization. We're the home of the Swarthmore Gospel Choir, which is again, it's really a multi-ethnic group, but it was founded and started out of the Black Culture Center, and that's where it still finds its home. We're also the home for the National Society of Black Engineers, which is a national student organization known as NSBE, for students who are interested obviously in engineering science. As we know, that Swarthmore is a liberal arts college that does have an engineering program. And then our final group, which is actually a tri-college, meaning it's inclusive of Bryn Mawr, Haverford, and Swarthmore, is the NAACP. And it's actually the base of the charter is at Bryn Mawr College, but it's a tri-college organization that is based here. It's based at in Bryn Mawr, but more often than not, they move the meetings from campus to campus, just so that it'll be the convenience for the students on their respective campus. In a nutshell, the BCC tries to critically engage students and others in the community around intellectual, personal interests around issues of race, ethnicity, culture, politics, and histories of Africans across the diaspora. And that's one of our goals, and we do it with a vibrance, a rigor that respects the academic pursuits of students, but we also like to guide students' personal and professional identity and their time they're enrolled at Swarthmore College. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
You, Amani. Ramani, I think we lost your audio there. Give us a second here. We're having some technical difficulties, y'all.
There we go. I'm trying to help my sister out here while she gets better. So I'll talk a little bit more. The identity centers, I think, we're a family. Obviously, Amani is the director of the Intercultural Center. We'll speak to that. But we also have a Women's Resource Center. And we work together. And because, the reality of it is that all students are coming to the campus with multiple ways of identifying or multiple identities. And there's an intersection, you know, there's a student who could obviously be a student of African descent who, you know, might have a Native American parent and they're affiliated with the Intercultural Center and identify as female. And so, you know, they could actually have activities, support, resources, or find them in each of the three centers. And I appreciate that. And so because of that, we often have to continue to work together, to plan together, to even, you know, think about how we move forward the agenda that not only lifts the independent work that we do, but the collective work that strengthens our individual students, but the community as a whole.
All right, I think I'm back. Can you all hear me now?
We
You're
can.
back, Imani. Thank you.
Oh, thank goodness Dion is so smart. Look, I'm sure he kept everyone engaged while I figured it out. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your patience as I figured out my technical difficulties. As I was starting, what I was attempting to say was that, you know, my time here as the director of the IC has been, I'm going on my second year now, but I wholeheartedly support everything Dion said, because around a decade ago, I was at the Black Cultural Center as a graduate intern. So I can speak to all of the amazing ways that the BCC has really created a wonderful community for us. So to talk a little bit more about the Intercultural Center, I'm just going to pull up my notes. So the IC, as it is affectionately known, is here to provide programs and services that support the personal and intellectual development of all students with various identities, Native American students, Latinx students, multicultural students, queer students, low-income international students, students living with disabilities, first-generation students. So we just have a plethora of students that really, whose needs we're here to support. We also, much like the BCC, strive to function as a space that's comfortable for students to relax, socialize, learn, find community, have their meetings, anything that really makes them feel comfortable and really create a home-like atmosphere for them in the while on campus. We also have a very multifunctional space. So we have spaces for studying, and we have spaces for meeting, and we have some areas that are cozy, we have a fireplace. So we were also developed out of a student activism and an increased desire for institutional support and commitment to students of color and queer students on campus. And since then, we have really evolved. We include over 20 student organizations that are known as the IC Collective, and we offer a series of programs and services that really explore different heritages, different identities, various nationalities, different faith traditions. So we're really here to make sure that everyone has a space that they can call home. We also, outside of just the student support part of it, we strive to really make the community a better place. So we do a lot around functioning like a cultural hub, or just as the BCC does, we work to really push our community forward and make sure that we're at the cutting edge of really understanding what it means to live in a really diverse world and a diverse society, and to support the idea of inclusion. And so we have a series of goals and a mission that really coincide with that. So in my role, I'm the director of the IC, but the IC is also the Intercultural Center and the Intercenter. So the Intercultural Center space that we're in, as Windsor mentioned earlier, actually houses three separate centers: the International Student Center, the Intercultural Center, and the Interfaith Center. And we have directors of each center that we all work together. Our team is made up of 4 people. We have a program director. We have my role as the director. We have our administrative assistant, who also is an administrative assistant to the Black Cultural Center, which really creates this awesome means of a liaison and us working together and being able to collaborate very effectively. And then we also have our associate director for gender and sexuality initiatives. So we have a team that really is here to make sure that we are supportive to everyone who needs our support in the community. I spoke a little bit about the IC, which is the IC Collective, which are the student organizations that we have. Again, we have a plethora of identities that fall under that umbrella of student orgs. We really encourage the students to have ownership of their organizations. It's a really great opportunity for professional development, to prioritize what you're passionate about. And it is also a space to really create a relationship between you as a student and some of the staff who are here to support the work that you do. So we are liaisons in many ways. A lot of times students will come to us and they will really have everything in place that they'd like to accomplish. And then we just help them with the parts that they can't necessarily do on their own, right? So interacting with the business office so that they can contract a really awesome speaker to come. That's something we would do. But the students would identify the speaker, communicate with the speaker, work on the terms of the agreement, and then we would come in and help. Of course, we're here to help as much or as little as is needed. We also have, as I mentioned before, our programs and events. We do a lot of collaborative programming. We try to make sure that we co-sponsor so that, you know, our goals are, and the goals of other spaces on campus, including departments, student organizations, or student centers, identity centers like the BCC, we make sure that we really push those collaborative efforts because we're really pushing intersectionality. So we understand the need to kind of work together in that way. We also have a series of Heritage Month celebrations. And so we are ending Latinx Heritage Month, moving into Pride Month, and then we will have Native American Heritage Month. We also celebrate Asian American and Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, Women's History Month. We collaborate when we can on Black History Month with the BCC, but of course that's something that the BCC does an amazing job of promoting on campus. And so this is really another opportunity to educate the community on these various identities and heritages, provide programming, providing educational opportunities. Finally, we've introduced our cultural competency workshop series this fall, and this is another effort on part of the Inclusive Excellence team, which incorporates our identity centers to really educate the community and help us move forward. So as we move into this conversation about our specific efforts on campus, you'll hear me talk a little bit more about the cultural competency work that we're doing this fall. Finally, we have interns. And so just as the BCC does, we have interns who work in our center all the time and who are really here to gain professional development. Again, just as the IC Collective, to build build their passion projects. Oftentimes our interns act as a liaison for the IC Collective organizations. And they just work with us from everything to deciding what we put on the walls in the center to deciding what guest speakers we're bringing in. So I'll stop there. I hope I gave a good overview of what we do. And again, thank you for your patience.
Thank you both for that. And please, folks, as our panelists are talking here, pop your questions in the Q&A. We hope to get to as many of those questions as we can after we finish our little conversation here. So we've heard a little bit kind of about the big picture stuff that the centers do. I'm really curious to hear more about how students get support in the center, what type of reoccurring events go on during your time during the school year, and what do student groups are doing on a regular basis in the center? How do folks use the center? So we'll start with you, Dion, and then Mana, you can add as well.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to pick up with one of the things that Amani left off with is that which I think is a wonderful thing. Just as there's an IC collective, there's a BCC collective. Obviously, it's smaller, but they have the IC BCC collective, which is this amazing thing to watch happen. That you have all the student groups who identify with the IC and all those student groups who identify with the BCC coming together to create their own. Sometimes it's their own training, sometimes it's their own events, sometimes it's just persons who are affiliated with the center getting together to have a social pizza party or game night. And I think that's a really important thing that that they do. As far as other sorts of support, I think that I always say that, the Black Cultural Center is often a place where we need to remind some and inform many about the richness of the Black experience in the world. And we do that through our programmatic initiatives. Some are larger programs programmed by the administrative staff, myself, and that includes everything from actually the picture that's my backdrop is our first event of the year, which is a welcome reception for all incoming first year families doing orientation weekend. And then we do a large open house for the community. We've been have been successful in having some annual fall speakers. We've had everyone from last fall, almost to the day. I think it was today, a year ago today, we had poet Nikki Giovanni. Year before that, we had Sabrina Fulton, the mother of Trayvon Martin. The year before that, we co-sponsored with the Lang Center to bring Brian Stevenson. And the year before that, we've Brian Stevenson of Just Mercy fame. And the year before that, we had another poet, Sonia Sanchez. So, I think it's important for us to do these large scale programs, not just for persons affiliated with the Black Cultural Center, but for the larger community to, like I say, inform and remind some about the Black experience. We do an annual Kwanzaa program, Kwanzaa being the African celebration that follows is between the week of Christmas and New Year's, where it's not a holiday, but it's a celebration of the richness of what it means to be of African descent. We do an annual MK celebration, which has really become a week that usually begins with a community service, a Swarthmore community service project of some sort. Again, I doubt that will happen this year, but it's things that we do. Of course, Black History Month, annual February list of events, and then we close it out with some spring activities and a big send-off banquet for our seniors. Other things that we have, I think the house itself is one of the largest resources for students. I mean, I can't say it enough that that house is really a home. You walk in the first floor and you have a dining room that often doubles as a study room. We have a kitchen. We have a living room where everything from they have watch night parties for the Grammys or the Super Bowl and things of that nature. And then we have a gallery. The gallery has our piano in it, and that's actually where the gospel choir practice. And I always tell people I get a free concert if I'm there every Thursday. Usually practice on Thursday nights because it's actually great, and it's right outside my office. The second floor, as far as resources go, we have a computer room where students can come and do academic work or research, and then also printing. They can print there. There's a lounge. We are a satellite of the McCabe, the main campus library, and we have holdings from the African or Black diaspora, a very small hold. I mean, we don't have all of the collection, but we have holdings. So I like that because often it brings in everyone from faculty members to students who may not frequent the BCC into the space to retrieve a book from our library. We have a classroom, a seminar room where I've been lucky and I've convinced my colleagues in the Black Studies program, probably for the past 3 or 4 years, definitely 3, I think it's 4, to teach their Intro to Black Studies course in the BCC. And it's worked well. I think, the BCC itself is part of Swarthmore's Black History, and why not have that intro course in there? And I've been lucky enough to convince them to teach it there. And we have another room, a smaller room called the empowerment room, And we keep everything in that space from, the GRE study guides, MCAT, LSAT study guides. Career Services always stocks it with, everything from sample cover letters to sample resumes. It's just a space where students can go in there and get enhancement opportunities that would help them beyond Swarthmore. And the third floor, I always say students don't want me up there. That's the fun floor. That's where the pool table is. That's where all the games are. That's where the other flat screen TV are. And they tell me I have to have permission to come up there because that's their space, but whatever. You know, some of the other things we do, you know, outside the student interns, we also have interns, and our interns have specific responsibilities. We have our programming interns who, you know, what it says, they create programming. We have a group of research interns, and our research interns are actually doing that. There's a lot of history about Blacks at Swarthmore or Blacks in the Philadelphia region that they're still uncovering to help us. We also have house managers who are just that when the administrative staff isn't there in the evenings, there's someone on staff there who can kind of, you know, just help guide people, make sure that people who use the kitchen clean up behind themselves, you know, and things, you know, kind of a security, a student security, you know, in the house in the evenings. And then we have another intern who helps us with web design. So I think that's all important. Our student interns, you know, like I said, we do a lot of the larger programs. I think they do the programs that really are meaningful sometime to the respective students in the community. They do wellness nights where they'll have students come in and they'll make potpourri satchels and aromatherapy lotions and things of that nature. We'll bring people in to do hand massages and, you know, to just, you know, especially around midterms or finals when students are feeling a bit stressed. They have an art house, which I absolutely love when they do the art house, where they have, they showcase the work of their peers on campus at the BCC, and they turn it into everything from an exhibit hall with images and posters that may have been created to someone who may have a talent being a musician, whether it's singing or playing an instrument. And of course, there's always a rapper or two in there because everybody think they can rap. And, and then finally, you know, they more often than not, we have some great spoken word. We actually have spoken word students who have won national competition, and there's always a spoken word artist in there. You know, one thing I like to brag about, I've been working in cultural centers most of my careers, and I've visited a lot from the East Coast to the West Coast to the South, to the North. And the Swarthmore is the only cultural center that has, that I visited that has a Grammy in it. We had one of our alum, you know, Don Mizell, who was actually the first president. He was the first president of SAS to occupy the BCC. He wasn't the first president of SAS, but when the BCC opened in '70, he was the president of SAS. And he said that all of his success, one of the reasons why he donated his Grammy to the BCC, because all of his success in the music industry came from what he learned as a student in those early years of the BCC. And he won the Grammy for producing the Ray Charles album, the Moments album, after Ray Charles had passed. I know I'm talking too much and we got a lot to get through, but a few other things the students use the space for is not uncommon, especially during finals and midterms, to come in there and find a student helping upperclassmen, helping underclassmen with an assignment. And I absolutely love that they help each other. Not uncommon to find students laid out with one of the mini blankets that we have on one of the couches saying, I just need a nap. And I just, you know, again, those things are just the things that make, as I can't say enough, that make this old house feel like a home. So thank you.
Thank you, Dion. I was the rapper my year at Swarthmore.
Oh, really? You were that guy.
I was that guy.
Okay.
Back in 2006, 2007.
Gotcha, the rapper.
So I will add only that much of what Dion speaks about as it relates to the BCC, we have like some version of it at the IC as well. I would never tell people you either go to the IC or the BCC. You can certainly go to both, and we encourage you to go to both. These are spaces that are here for you to make sure that you get the most of your experience at the college. And while there is overlap in the resources that we have available, there's certainly room for everybody. So I will say that we also have, I'll just think of some of our keynote things, like we have the IC Awards Banquet. We do that every year. That's really amazing because we actually have a series of awards that are connected to some of the things that really make our community unique, such as awards based in activism, awards based in you know, being a resource as a staff person or a professor, being a resource to the students. We added an advocacy award for people, those who identify as advocates for people who are living with disabilities this year. We named it after two professors who've been really vocal on campus and have really pushed our community forward in that way. We also have had our first lavender celebration this year. So, you know, we have various celebrations, and for those who may not know, it's a celebration specifically for queer students or queer graduates. So those are just some things. We also have events that are connected to the various Heritage Months. So our Heritage Month ceremonies often will have like a keynote speaker. We'll have like a keynote performance that occurs, and that's something that is determined by the committee, which is made up of students. So in terms of the comfort of the space, just as Dion said, we really strive to make sure that these spaces are multifunctional. And so, you know, we have spaces that are really comfortable and for relaxing, but we also have study spaces. We also have a prayer room on our garden level floors. So that's something that's really awesome. Before we were gifted the building that we're currently in and the renovations that came in it with it, we had another space that we had. It's known as the Old IC. We have turned that big room into another space for Friday prayers and for various meetings for different groups. It's a really big open space. So in terms of other stuff, Dion mentioned the art house. We also do a series of art houses that are connected to the IC. Our students create a newsletter. Our interns also have specific responsibilities that coincide with whatever they are really great at or whatever they really want to do in the future. So there's room for like specialized involvement. And then finally, I'll say something that I think that my colleague will really appreciate. One of the really great ways that we offer support, so the question that was posed was like, how do we offer student support? I am really proud to say that Dion and myself are not just directors of the centers, but we're also student deans. And I think there's something to be said about having a director of a center also be a student dean, because we have eyes on both worlds. And, you know, it's not uncommon for a student to be coming into our space regularly and then we become their dean, because we see them all the time. We've created this relationship with them and we're really here to support them. So our dual role creates this really awesome way for the two of us to like wrap around the students that we support. And so I would just stop there. I mean, yeah.
Thank you both again. Again, if folks have questions, you can start putting those in the Q&A. We're going to save the last 50 minutes or so for your questions for our panelists. So I'm going to combine two of our questions together that we had planned. And I'm curious to know, obviously, we're in a tumultuous time in the nation around issues of race and identity. There's conversations with George Floyd's murder and Black Lives Matter going on. And Swarthmore students themselves are engaged in conversations about identity all the time. So I'm really curious to hear what role the centers play in helping the college and students think through those issues of identity and challenges around identity and conversations around class or race, or what role they play in a larger community around Swarthmore as well, and how do students take what they learn in the centers and maybe bring that stuff out into the world as well. You're welcome to start, Amadi, if you want to. So I've been having Dion start the last couple ones.
Oh, well, see, I like it with Dion start. But okay, I'll start this one off. So the question around like kind of what we're doing to kind of like help the community to understand issues around race, current issues around race and social justice. So first, I'll start by saying it's really awesome to work at a space that social justice is like in the mission, right? So that creates a platform for us to just know that like we can bring these conversations in and that they will be prioritized because this is who we say we are, right? That's the space that we have chosen to work in. And, you know, as a result of that, there's a really awesome like desire for us to do this work. So one thing that I can say is that we're part of the larger Inclusive Excellence team. And so the Inclusive Excellence team immediately responded by creating this past summer a series called Dismantling Anti-Black Bias. It was a workshop series. So that's something that our larger team and Shay Duncan Smith, who is the VP, and her title is so long. She's VP and I think VP of Community Development and Engagement, something really awesome. But so she created this workshop series and many of us participated in it, right? So we had this immediate response to it. Also, we communicated with the community and said, you know, we recognize this is happening. We recognize that this is something that we need to address as a community and figure out where to go from here. We also were really mindful about understanding who we are as people who are African American or Black and who are experiencing this, right? And I love that, you know, part of what we did in terms of self-care for our community was like self-care for ourselves professionally and having these discussions with each other and recognizing kind of the role that all of that plays. And we also reached out to our interns specifically and to provide support. So I mentioned earlier that we are doing these this community workshop series on cultural competency, and we're focusing specifically on intercultural communication and communicating across difference. So the series we are doing 4 workshops, and we're going to continue to develop it and meet the needs of the community. And this is something that we designed to be like a co-curricular experience that's open to everybody. And so currently the series has included sometimes speaking about identity and our own identity development and the role that, you know, our personal identity plays in how we understand instances of social injustice and inequality and all of the things that come along with living in a society that is both multiracial, multinational, multicultural, multi-identity, but also has some really serious hierarchies and a really interesting history around that, right? So talking that through and then understanding also the identities of those who we interact with. Some of you may be familiar with the iceberg, right? So the idea that there's some parts of a person that you can see very clearly, really a small part, but then there are parts that you can't see that really create who that person is. Just today, we had a workshop called Why Are We Talking Past Each Other? So taking what you know about yourself and how you became who you are and what you know about people who you interact with and understanding how those come together and sometimes create miscommunication. And then finally, this time around, we're going to talk about what it means to move from ethnocentric to ethno-relative. What does it mean to become truly culturally relative and to increase your intercultural capacity? So that's just a little bit of what we're doing, but we have absolutely stepped up to the plate and understand that this is part of the work we do. And this is just one part of what's going on campus. So I'll hand it over to Zion.
Thank you, Amani. And now I know why you want to go first, because you hit all the same spot. Like there's no need to repeat a lot of the stuff. So that's why I understand. But you're spot on when you talk about the response from our community, in particular our division of Inclusive Excellence, the response or the engagement with our interns and to figure out how we can move forward. And, you know, it's really, you know, for me, and I think for many of us, it started with my own self-reflection and self-care. Like I'm human. I am a Black man in America who's also experienced some of these inconsistent treatments when it comes to, because of the color of my skin. So, you know, we started there. And I'll just, you know, for us, we decided, we being the Black Culture Center, we've done a series of, we have a series of programs that we've been called Black Fridays. Our first one was complexities of health disparities. And that was presented by a Swarthmore alum who's an MD, who talked a lot about how the instances of COVID and things that we've seen in underrepresented communities, marginalized communities, low socioeconomic communities are reoccurring or have been reoccurring in the history of America. And COVID was just a reminder of that. And she talked about, she went as far back as, some of the Native Americans and the treatment they received or they didn't receive. And she moved on to the Tuskegee Institute. She gave a whole historical, and she gave a great talk about how members of the LGBT community were impacted or not impacted when the AIDS pandemic hit. And so that was the first one. Our second one is actually this Friday, and we'll be talking about it's racial fatigue and racial trauma within institutions. And we have some psychologists coming to talk about that, is that, there's because we're engaged in institutions of higher education, we can still, we don't, the door doesn't close, the window doesn't close, or the television doesn't go off. There's still all these racial, I think college campuses definitely create a safer space sometimes than the larger world, but there's still a fatigue that comes from being in a marginalized group. And how do you navigate that and still be the best student you can be in this space? And then this is when our interns were saying, we have, COVID has been an impact. We know that COVID has been a financial impact. Students have been worried about getting internships or post-Swarthmore positions and things of that nature. And so we have an editor from Black Enterprise coming, who's also on the Susie Orman show, and she's going to do a talk on, financial well-being and financial equaling overall well-being, and she's going to talk about that. And then our last one will be we have a chief diversity officer coming in and talking about what it means to be a member of a marginalized group in higher education in this day, in this time, and how we being administrators, but also how students can maximize that experience to navigate and appreciate where we are in this space and time, but still maximize, still get what you, as you say, what you came here for. Not only your academic degree, but your social interactions, your professional trainings, that friend group, that network that might be a little more difficult to create during this hybrid or these remote settings. And so he's going to talk about that. I would say, the other thing is that, one thing that I stated earlier is that there's a lot of collaborations and we don't talk enough about this, I think, between the tri-college system, the Bryn Mawr, Haverford, and Swarthmore. And I think one thing that has benefited the BCC community at Swarthmore is that out of the tri-college systems, we're the only one that has a Black cultural center. And so that brings I've met just probably as many, incoming Bryn Mawr students and Haverford students, just from their interactions at the BCC. They want to come to that space. They want to, do programming, events. And our interns in particular are very intentional about creating tri-college events at the BCC, because they understand that that space is special to them, and how it not only fuels their spirit and energizes them, but it also offers an intellectual acumen that they want to share with the other students at other schools. And yeah, and I think, that's it. I think the other thing I only say is about a resource is that our interns living in the space with their peers, they're probably one of our great resources. They come back to us with ideas. Sometime that we can just move forward with what they are. Sometimes Amani and I need to add our professional experience as well as education and say, well, we can do it this way. But I think in many ways, our interns are our best, because they're a voice of their peers, and they bring that to us. So I think I'll stop there because I know time is getting short, and I look forward to answering any questions you all may have.
Excellent. Thank you again, Dion and Amani, for joining us. I've asked lots of questions of our two panelists. I'd love to hear some questions from you all. And there's one in the chat right now, so please pop your questions in the chat. We're going to try to get as many as we can before we end at 7 o'clock. First question I see here from Nicole. She's asking us, do you find that social justice and inclusion work is built into classes? Do you find those things in the curriculum as much as you might find them, say, in your spaces?
I mean, I should say that I do know that there are some obviously faculty members that have it in their coursework. We don't have access to all of the obviously the syllabi at the college, but I do know that there are multiple disciplines. Obviously Black studies, women and gender studies, political science, peace and conflict studies, history, the humanities, sociology. I mean, actually, as recent as 2 or 3 weeks ago, a biology professor reached out to me, and I think it's because of the time, and wants to start talking about some things she might be able to do in her classroom to make it feel more inclusive. And again, I think that's a byproduct of where we are right now in America.
I'll just add from a student perspective, because I was a student here back in 2007, but it really is true. I think this connection between what students are doing in the classroom and what they're doing in these centers and these conversations about social justice and inclusion permeate the campus and the campus culture. So you find student groups engaged in these conversations around inclusion and social justice, civic engagement. Spaces like our Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility is a great place where students can go get information about how to turn their ideas around civic engagement into actual projects with funds provided by the Lang Center. And so you'll find these conversations kind of permeate the college at the heart of what a lot of things we do here at Swarthmore. Got a question that's hanging out in the chat. Again, keep putting your questions in the Q&A space, but there's one here in the chat as well. The question is, yeah, so how does the support for students with intersectional identities or more intersectional identities compare to support with students with less intersectional identities? And the student gives the questioner gives the example of support available for cis Black students compared to support available for trans Black students.
I can start. Mr. Deanna has something to follow up with. So, as I was reading this question, I thought that like the support that we provide each student is individualized, right? So if you identify as a Black trans student, there are resources available to Black trans students. And so the difference in terms of understanding the difference is just based upon the various identities that the student has and what they are comfortable with receiving from our center. So that's how I would answer that. And so I was thinking of one more way to kind of say it. We all have intersectional identities. So how they appear and how we decide that we want to engage them is particular to our experience. So across the board, the support that you would receive would be particular to what you feel you need and what resources we can provide that you're interested in receiving from us.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think, the other side of that is that our Swarthmore is a very diverse community. There are professionals who, whether they're faculty or staff, professionals that may work in everything from the EVS or facilities to the dining hall, who also have intersections of their identities. And I really have watched and witnessed how they have also supported students. Being an elder, you can always learn something from an elder. But we also have, I like the fact that our students who had those same intersections, become the big SIBs, as they call them on campus, to the younger incoming students who have some of those intersections of identities. We have trans students that are interns in both of our centers. We have students who have with disabilities. We have students who are low income. We have students who are homeless. We have a lot of students who have various identities that actually are part of what I call our overall team and network as well.
Thank you for that question. Another question is in the Q&A. What is support like for low-income students at Swarthmore? How does Swarthmore integrate low-income students into the campus community?
Very well. Very well. I actually was in a meeting earlier about that. I think, I mean, the support varies. I mean, I think the first line of support is that there's actually a dean assigned. There's an office, it's called the FLY office, first generation low income, FLI, but it's the FLY office, and Dean Karen Henry, who's also the dean of the first year student, the first year's dean, and Nakia Waters, she's the program coordinator. They have a list of initiatives that vary from everything from, helping students get resources, whether it's books or a computer, to if a student needs to get assistance getting home. And I mean, just them alone. But then there's also, and I forget the name of the student group, Amani, what is the name of but there's a student group. I forget the name of the student group.
That works with that's first generation students or first generation low income students.
Are you thinking about Solus?
Yes, because they've changed the name. Like, the reason I know, because they've changed the name like 3 times, and I didn't want to, but it is Solus now.
Is it Swarthmore Organization for Low Income Students?
Exactly.
It might be something different on the website right now, guys.
Right, but it changes a lot. But thank you, Windsor. But again, there's even a student group for first gen and low income students. But then, one of the things that I love at the beginning, again, another orientation program, is that they have a first gen low income orientation welcome reception. And I love the fact that there's so many faculty, persons with terminal degrees and persons in upper administration who come and say, I too was where you were once upon a time. I too was a first year, and I was a first gen or low income. So there's lots of resources. And if they're very obvious, but if they're not obvious, the centers, any dean can also help you tap into them.
And I'll just only add quickly that we're also a cash-free campus here at Swarthmore, and so that means events that were hosted, all events that Amani's been talking about, all the events that Dion's been talking about, they're all free to students, right? You're not paying any door money for any of those events. So the activities fee that's a part of tuition moving board here, covered by your financial aid for lots of low-income students, covers everything you may or may not do any given day at Swarthmore College. That's true here at Swarthmore. It's also true at our two our tri-college partners at Bryn Mawr and Hereford as well. And so we want students to have access to all the academic, all the social opportunities the college offers, without having to worry about how much money they have to pay to get into those events, because they're all going to be free. So you can just walk right in if you want to go to an event. Super, super important. Printing is also free, and laundry is also free here at Swarthmore too, for those similar reasons. We're getting close to the end of our time here, but 5 minutes left. If you have any last questions for us, put them in the chat while you're thinking of any final questions. Put them in the Q&A. If you're thinking of any final questions, I have one question for our panelists here while you're thinking of your last questions. Dion and Amani, do you have any advice? We have lots of maybe young people that are getting ready to apply to college on with us this evening. Any advice for those folks about what resources to be looking out for as they're thinking about a colleges they're applying to, in light of the work you do on our campuses, on our campus?
She wants me to go first, so I will. I mean, I think one of the first thing is that, it's one of the biggest challenges, and I have some nieces and nephews who are in the same spot, is that visiting. I think one of the things that you cannot do because of the state of the health state right now is visit campuses, whether they're local or another side of the country. And I'm concerned about that, because I think there's something that you learn when you walk the space that you may be living in for 4 or 5 years or so. And so I think one of the first things you do is this, and if there's any school, Swarthmore hopefully, that interests you, attend these workshops. If there's opportunities to reach out or communicate with an alum, a current student, a faculty or a staff member, do that, do that. There aren't many schools who don't have something published about them somewhere. Read it. Look up on it. I mean, I don't always think that the college guides are always the best. They're printed for a purpose. So you might need to delve into some type of local periodical, whether it's a newspaper or, a community, something, but you need to learn about the area that the college is in, and how even the surrounding communities interact or don't interact and with that. And I think finally, for me, if you truly want a place that will offer a great academic, rigorous program, but also, cultural enhancement, ethnic enhancement, social enhancement, Swarthmore is one of those places. But you also need to, when you're looking at, schools, you need to see, have a checklist and decide what are the things that are my non-negotiables. That will really make me the well-rounded citizen that I need to be when I finish.
Yep.
That's it. Way to go.
And then I would only add, the only thing, if I had to add anything, would be see if folks are doing the type of stuff you're interested on campus. So when I started looking at grad schools, I was like, is there a professor in the program that I'm interested in that does stuff that I like? Or any of the student groups that are on campus or some of their initiatives that I want to be a part of. So just see if we have stuff going on that you're interested in. And if not, at Swarthmore, I can say you can do it yourself. So I have my dog on my lap so that she doesn't bark the whole time. So, but I agree with everything Dion said, and we really appreciate you all coming out this evening or whatever time it is, wherever you are, to join all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This has been great.
Well, thank you again to our panelists.
Can I just say one thing?
Go ahead, Dion. Go ahead.
Feel free to give them, I'll speak for mine, to our emails if they have any direct questions. You can send them or put them in the chat, because I'm more than willing to exchange, a conversation or answer questions that may not have had a chance to be posted tonight. I'm more, or should we have done that? I'm putting on you as if you have our emails in your mind. I mean, I guess we could.
I'll ask my colleague Lisa is going to pop them into the chat for you there. So folks have questions for either Dion or Amani that we weren't able to get to tonight. Please follow up with them via email. If you missed them in the chat, you can also find their contact information online when you search the centers at swarthmore.edu. So please do that if you have more questions for either Dion or Amani about their centers, about their work on campus, about how they support students. Thank you so much for joining us. We're at the end of our time. We really appreciate you all. We have more open access events that are going to be online posted. So please go to our Connect with Swarthmore page to see more of our events that we're posting up. Some really great things coming on the pipeline to help you get to know Swarthmore, to find out if it's a place you might want to spend 4 years of your college years. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you all. Thank you. Wins.
Thanks.
Can we stay open for 30 seconds just to make sure they get the emails if they want?
We sure can, yep.
Okay.
Stay here for 30 minutes so you can grab those emails.
But I'm leaving.
Thank you, Dion and Amani. Thank you so much, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now, y'all.